Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Hey, girl.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, grrr.
Hello, and thanks for coming, America. My name is Seth. What is yours?
Hi, Jamal here.
Hi, it's Stony.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Thanks for Coming. It's the most magically gay podcast in all of history. And in this podcast, we are going to talk to you about Stonewall, the Stonewall Riots. And it's going to be a little bit different than most podcasts that you get from us because, typically I like to think of us as a comedy podcast. And, I'm sure there'll be little elements of that here and there. But yeah, we're going to talk to you about basically the origin of the Gay Pride Parade.
Yes, I'm excited to dig into this one.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a really fun one. So hopefully you guys will stick with us through this one and it will be interesting to you because, this is our podcast and not yours. So we're going to talk about whatever we want.
And yeah, shade. If you don't listen to this one, you need to do better.
Yeah, you're not a good gay if you've already paused and left.
That's right. Your membership is at risk.
Sorry, girl. All right. Well, before we get into that, though, I just wanted to check in. Jamal and Stony, how's your week been? What have you guys been up to?
My week's been good. I've been I don't know what's happening. I went to no drinking basically, just socially. If I'm out with friends or if we have plans, then I'll have some drinks. Otherwise, I'm not. And cutting out dairy. And I'm down 8 pounds since coming back from Vegas.
Wow.
My pre-Vegas weight. So that's nice. So just rolling into summer, feeling good here.
What a square.
Yeah, you're like Regina George. You just lost all the weight so fast.
I just want to lose 3 pounds.
Is butter a carb?
No, it's actually not, friends.
What about you, Stony? What's new with you, girl?
Not really a whole lot. Just getting back in the swing of things. Yeah, not really anything too interesting, I guess.
Wow. I'm glad we asked.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was more to report. I don't know,
Yeah, the weather's pretty shitty here. I guess work's been fine for me. We have a big office visit next week, so people are coming in from our corporate office and our Canadian offices, so that'll be fun.
Oh, Jamal and I just planned a cabin vacation for September for kind of a weekend getaway type thing.
Yes, we did. I'm so pumped
It's
already.
gonna be just like Brokeback Mountain, girl.
Yeah, well, we're going to be celebrating paying off student loans. Because that's kind of where we're on track. So fingers crossed, our house doesn't burn down in between now and then.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh, take it back. Why would you even say that?
I don't know, girl. Jinx.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, my week was kind of not too interesting, but I do have a funny story to tell you guys about my life. Well, I went to go see the movie Dark Phoenix yesterday.
Okay.
I liked it a lot. I know that it was a flop, but according to the box office, but I thought it was entertaining enough, to be enjoyable.
That's good to hear because usually I'm so easy to please. Most of the time I think the opposite of these Rotten Tomato reviews. So I would still go see it.
Yeah, me too.
I know people are super hateful of the new X-Men, the younger, more different universe of that, and they want to see their 58th Wolverine movie. However, I really love the new X-Men class. So yeah, there's so many hotties. We got Nicholas Hoult, we got Evan Peters,
yes,
the dude
Evan.
that plays
Quicksilver.
Kurt, what is his name? Nightcrawler. Yeah, he's cute. Who else? I don't know. There's lots of hotties. I mean, you got Magneto, whatever that actor's name is. I think he's super popular.
Nobody likes change, and we'll talk about change on this episode with Stonewall and such. But listen here, people.
Yeah.
Wolverine needed to go. I never got a Storm movie. I don't want to fucking hear it. So we're
Right.
moving on.
Yeah. Storm was pretty epic in this movie, too. So I was like, yes.
Ooh, good. I like hearing that.
I supposedly like this was the last of the Fox like license, so now I think
right.
Disney is taking back the license. So expect a reboot of X-Men.
Yeah. Damn it. Rude. But there is a TV show, like the new Avengers, I think. Or no, it's the new X-Men. Or
Yeah, I think it's like a Disney show or something. Is it like the New Mutants or something?
yeah, that's what it's called. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I went to the movie anyways, and I went to AMC. Normally I go to Regal, but I went to AMC this time because they had an earlier showtime, and I didn't want any damn kids in my movie.
I know that's right. Listen, I like kids, but sometimes you have to do things with no kids around to fully enjoy it.
I like to do pretty much everything with no kids around.
Yeah, pretty much everything is more enjoyable without children.
So I went there and I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna have like a little bit of popcorn because it's like lunchtime. And so at AMC they give you like two options. It's like the small ass bag or like a wheelbarrow full of popcorn. And I'm just like, well, I guess I'll take the wheelbarrow.
Can I have the wheelbarrow? Can I get the butter on the side?
Yeah. Actually, never mind. You can put it in there. I'll mix it myself. And then they put like a big shovel in there. But so I'm like, and then he's the guy that was helping was very nice, but he's like, do you have our like rewards card? And I'm like, no, it's fine. He's like, it's really good, like you can get like free like refills, and like if you need like another wheelbarrow popcorn, you could come back and get a refill in the movie. and I'm like, you know what, no thank you, really, this is plenty.
That's dangerous.
Yeah. And then so he goes and he makes fills up the wheelbarrow and he rolls it out and he's like, this is all you get. And I'm like,
holy shit,
this is all you're gonna get. And I'm like, that's fine. I don't need any more than this.
Listen, give this guy a raise. He is selling it. He's like,
I know,
this is all you get, girl. Are you sure?
I was like, you're not my mom. I can do whatever I want.
God damn it.
I know. So then I was like, okay, cool. And then I walked off and he's like,
That's
you sure?
great.
As I'm like walking off, he's like, are you sure you don't want the rewards card? It's like, it's fine.
No, bitch, leave me alone.
I sprinted to my movie theater.
I know, that's right. Go away.
And so like, of course, like I didn't even finish. I finished like maybe a little over a half of it. So I was half tempted to just come out there and be like, just dump it into the trash can as I stare him into the eyes without even blinking. Like, I don't need your damn rewards card.
He would have quit. He'd throw down his name tag and walk out.
This is the 5th time this week. I quit.
I would have probably ate the wheelbarrow full though.
Oh, I know you would have, girl.
Movie popcorn is dangerous. Like, it's really good. I used to get it with butter in high school. Now I just eat it without it. It's still good.
I can eat some popcorn.
Yeah. Let's just say Stoney would have needed the reward card.
Yeah,
girls,
I would definitely signed up. I'd be like, first question he asked, I would be like, yes.
Yes.
The answer will always be yes.
Thank you.
Is there only one refill with this, or like how does that work?
Can I get double refills?
Girl. This is our cheat day. I'll just eat 3 wheelbarrows full of popcorn.
Oh, shit. Wear your stretchy
Lord.
pants, girl.
Yeah, wear your eating dress, queen.
It's gluten free.
You wish. Good God. So that was my entertaining story of the week. I went to go see Rocket Man again, and so that's my life basically. So why don't we go ahead and get into this show, and let's talk about Stonewall.
Yes, history.
Honesty. All right, you guys, welcome back to our Honest Tea Spill of the week, where this week we will be talking about the Stonewall Riots. And this is a very poignant wrap up for our Pride Month podcast, because this was, one of the sparks that led to the first Pride Parade. So Jamal and Stoney and I were like, let's go ahead and do this cool topic. We'll try a little bit of different content and see what you guys think.
Yeah, I think this will be a fun one to get into into and dissect and, just overall talk about it as people in the queer community.
Absolutely. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Even a little bit before the beginning. So in a land far, far away, in a galaxy so close to Mars, I don't know. So, okay, here we go. A little bit of history of Manhattan, New York. And so basically, the Manhattan neighborhood of Greenwich Village and Harlem were home to a sizable homosexual population after World War I. And men and women and those who had served in the military took advantage of the opportunity to settle into larger cities like New York. Mm-hmm. New York City and Stonewall are not the first riots in LGBT activism, but it was sort of the spark that really drove it into the mainstream and was really, the catalyst. It really took the movement and caught fire there.
Mm-hmm. People had had enough, so this was that moment.
Absolutely. So, by the early 1960s, a campaign to rid New York City of gay bars was in full effect by order of their mayor, Robert F. Wagner Jr., the homophobe.
Yeah.
Who he was concerned more about the image of the city in preparation of the 1964 World's Fair. So the city revoked the liquor licenses of the bars, and undercover police officers worked to entrap as many homosexual men as possible. And these entrapments usually consisted of an undercover officer who found a man in a bar or a public park, engaged him in conversation, and if the conversation headed toward the possibility that they might leave together, or the officer bought the man a drink, he was arrested for solicitation, girl.
Yeah, it was super predatory. We were actually watching Drunk History with Crystal on Marsha P. Johnson, and I had forgot this, but there was a name for this group. It was the Moral Squad or some bullshit. But they were basically a small troop within the police force set out to do these twisted-ass missions.
Yes, that is true. And I know I have the name for these people in my notes here somewhere. So I know one of the names was the Betty Brigade.
Oh.
But I can't remember now. So when we get there, you'll get there. One story about entrapment is in the New York Post, where they described an arrest in a gym locker room where the officer grabbed his crotch, moaning, and the man who asked him if he was all right was arrested.
Wow.
So few lawyers would defend cases as undesirable as these, and some of those lawyers kicked back their fees to the arresting officer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So the ones that would defend the homosexuals.
I had heard that a lot. I don't know where I heard it from, but I've watched several documentaries and stuff, but I remember them saying that a lot of the arrests were super shady. It was even if you just looked at them or I don't know, even just said hi or something, they would find a reason to arrest you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, 100%. So, like we were saying at the time, homosexual acts remained illegal in every state except for Illinois. So and bars and restaurants could get shut down for having gay employees or serving gay patrons. Kind of sounds like where our country's headed now again.
Right, no joke.
At least in Alabama.
Yeah.
For sure. So most of the gay bars in New York at the time, including the Stonewall, were operated by the mafia, the Italian mafia, and they paid corruptible police officers to look the other way, and they blackmailed wealthy gay patrons by threatening to out them.
Yeah, it's all a business. And I mean, much like today, thinking back then during those times, it's this is why people feel like they can't trust law enforcement because they're easily paid off. Shout out to Queer as Fact podcast. They'd done some deep research on episode 66 on Stonewall, and they quoted numbers as far as 1,500 upwards of 8,000 that local police were receiving to keep these bars open.
Wow. That's really crazy.
Yeah, from the mafia. They were paying them to keep the bars open that amount of money per month.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I've lost my place. All right. We can do this, you guys.
So many notes.
I know. Sorry, I have a lot of notes. Okay, here we go. We're back here. Okay, we're getting there, girl. Okay, so now you have a little bit of background information leading up to the riots about the culture in New York revolving around homosexuals. So now we're going to talk to you about the Stonewall Inn itself. So I have a little description of Stonewall. That way, when we start to describe like the events that took place, then you can kind of imagine it in your head. Like you could, as a gay person, relate to like being in that situation. So the Stonewall Inn is located at 51 and 53 Christopher Street in Greenwich Village. So this, like I said, was owned by the Genovese crime family, the Italian mafia. Mm-hmm. And in 1966, 3 of the mafia members invested $3,500 to turn the Stonewall Inn into a gay bar.
Heyo.
Yes.
Yes, it was previously a restaurant and a nightclub for heterosexuals, but now, I don't know what changed their mind, but they're like, all right, well, this is going to be for the gays now, so we can really fuck them over.
I don't know if this has been confirmed, but it's allegedly there were members of the mafia that were also gay, so they were attending the bar and hooking up with patrons of the Stonewall Inn.
Oh, wow. I didn't hear that, but that sounds right.
Yeah.
So once a week, a police officer would collect an envelope of cash as a payoff, as the Stonewall Inn had no liquor license. And it had no running water behind the bar, so the glasses were cleaned by running them through tubs of water and then immediately reused.
Yeah, it was like, Seth, think about it. Like, this was a Kappa Kappa Psi at IU water bottle cleaning, but minus the soap, probably.
Yeah.
Dip the bottles in a bucket of water and dry them off.
Yeah, girl. That's how
Yikes.
I did the dishes at several of my previous jobs, too.
Oh, no.
Oops.
But they were doing their best, right? Working with what they had. As a queer community back then in 69, they didn't really have much, so they're just happy to have it, right?
Right. So there were no fire exits, and the toilets were constantly like getting clogged and overflowing. Mm-hmm. Though the bar was not used for prostitution, drug sales, or any other cash transactions. It was only a bar for gay men in New York City where dancing was allowed. It was the only bar, and also only gay men were allowed to go in at first.
Right. There was a, call it dress code for lack of a better phrase. But yes, only cis gay males can get in. So not early drag, no trans men or women. You had to look like a dude, act like a dude, whatever that means back then. But if you did not fit that description, you were not getting in.
Right. And so, yeah, so kind of what Jamal was saying, the visitors to the Stonewall Inn, they were greeted by a bouncer who would inspect them through a peephole in the door. The legal drinking age was 18 back then, and to avoid unwittingly letting in these undercover police officers. Okay, so here they are. They are also called the Lily Law, or Alice Blue Gown, or the Betty Badge.
The Betty Badge.
Oh, that's what the officers were called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the plainclothed officers that would come in to try and like entrap the homosexual attendees of this bar.
That's just wild. Like, they just went so out of their way to try to entrap these people.
Right. So these visitors, they would either have to be known by the doorman or look gay.
Pretty much.
The entrance fee on the weekends was $3, for which the customer would receive 2 drink tickets. And patrons were required to sign their names into a book to prove that the bar was a private bottle club because they didn't have a liquor license, but the people rarely would sign their own names.
Right. Or they'd use, yeah, exactly. They'd use fake names or aliases.
Yes. And there were 2 dance floors in the Stonewall, and the interior was painted black, making it very dark inside with the pulsing, lights like you would expect to see at a club.
Red light special, baby. I'm sure there were like a tons of red lights, maybe black lights.
Yes, girl. If the police were spotted, regular white lights were turned on, signaling that everyone should stop dancing or touching.
Uh-huh.
And in the rear of the bar was a smaller room frequented by Queens. It was one of 2 bars where effeminate men who wore makeup and teased their hair, basically drag queen or trans people, could go. Only a few cross-dressers or men in full drag were allowed in by the bouncers. So they were like, back then it's not, you're not getting 3 seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race in a row.
Right.
They
Right.
were like, the drag queens were kind of like frowned upon and considered an embarrassment of the gay community back then. So it's like, obviously come a long way since then.
Yes, it has, but it's still very much something you see in the community today with the way people choose their friends or even how they date. It's like, oh, that's not what gay is to me, so you're not welcome.
Yeah, like mask to mask.
Exactly.
Or mask for mask.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
if you get on like Grindr, the apps today, like not everyone, but like you'll see people that are just like, oh, no fats, no femmes, no Asians, or people just like super like racist or
Super body
transphobic
shaming.
or that type of shit.
Yeah.
But way worse back then, obviously.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Kind of what we were saying. The customers were 98% male, but a few lesbians sometimes came to the bar. Also, there were lots of younger, homeless, adolescent males who slept in the nearby Christopher Park, and they would often try to get in so the customers could buy them drinks. The age of the clientele ranged from the upper teens and early 30s, and the racial mix was evenly distributed among white, black, and Hispanic patrons, supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly. It was a pretty mixed crowd from what I've read and things I've watched as well. But there was kind of like a natural segregation up amongst the groups just because it was very, this is the mask crowd and these are the cross-dressers and, very that.
Yeah, very much so. And because of its even mix of people, its location, and the attraction of dancing, the Stonewall Inn was known by many as the gay bar in the city.
Yep, there was, you can definitely tell it was the it spot, even though it was like a hole in the wall, very run down. It was really the only place that people that were in the closet or, people in the community could go and enjoy themselves. And whether they bitched about it or they enjoyed it, people were showing up regardless.
Y'all are still coming.
That's right.
So let's talk about the raids. Police would raid the gay bars frequently, and they would occur on average about once a month for each bar.
Yep, once a month for each bar. And the Stonewall, really, if you think about it, the frequency probably could have been much higher without the payoffs that were going on behind the scenes. A lot of the raids, it's rumored to be they were just kind of going through the motions just to take like a few in here and there. And it's also rumored that was maybe an agreement amongst the mafia. It's like, okay, you have to do your job. We'll keep paying you, but don't get too crazy.
Right, because ultimately they need people to come pay the money to keep their bars open.
Right.
So many of the bars, they kept extra liquor in a secret panel behind the bar or in a car down the street so that they could resume business as quickly as possible if the alcohol was seized during the raid. The bar management usually knew about the raids beforehand due to police tip-offs, and raids occurred early enough in the evening that business could commence after the police were done.
Yep.
Typically, during a raid, the lights were turned on, customers were lined up, and their identification cards were checked. Those without identification or dressed in full drag were arrested. Some were allowed to leave. And some of the men, including those in drag, they would use their draft cards as identification, which was kind of interesting, I thought.
Yeah, well, because it was the 60s, I guess. Like, I didn't see a draft card until I applied for college, but I'm sure it was like a very different time.
Like, are you talking like draft, like army draft?
Yeah, for like the war.
Like the military.
Well, I guess like, yeah, Vietnam War was going on.
Because every
then.
person gets a number.
Oh, yeah, selective service or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So the women were required to wear 3 pieces of feminine clothing and would be arrested if they were not wearing that. And men that were dressed in women's clothing were taken to a back room and they were inspected by the female police officer. And if they were found to be men dressing up as women, then they would be arrested.
Yeah, it was very, this is how you dress straight. This is how you dress like a man. This is how you dress like a woman. They were very by the book that way, which society tends to be. This is the way it is, or it's not right.
Yes. which was crazy. The period leading up to the Stonewall riots, there was a raid earlier in the week, and there was this other raid plan that happened on Stonewall, which they thought was the police's attempt to shut down the Stonewall Inn for good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now we'll take a quick little break, and when we come back, we'll tell you about how Judy Garland threw the first brick to start the Stonewall riots.
Wigs will roll.
Be right back, y'all. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to our podcast so far. Thanks for coming. Right now, we're probably refilling our drinks, or maybe even gluing down our lashes again. While you wait, here's some things that you should check out.
Yeah, remember everyone, you can email us, tfcpod@gmail.com, and tfcpod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Oh, and one more thing. You're not my real dad, and you never will be. Anyways, back to the show. All right, you guys, welcome back to Thanks for Coming. I know you guys were probably waiting for us to talk about how Judy Garland started the Stonewall Riots, so here you go. Oh, if none of you get that joke, it's from RuPaul's Drag Race. Sorry.
Yeah, catch up.
So before we get too far back into it, I did want to read this quote that is by Michael Bettinger, who is one of the people that were at Stonewall at the riots. And this quote is about him, and he's talking about what really caused this to become the turning point, and what caused them to go into action, basically.
Okay.
So he says, "All right, my belief and view, it was only serendipity. It was a very hot night and a very warm night that June night. For what it's worth, Judy Garland was buried that afternoon. She was very popular in the community, and I think it was just serendipity that the police decided to raid Stonewall that night."
Wow.
You can read all about the history, the payoffs, and exactly how it happened. It could have easily just have happened in San Francisco, I think. In San Francisco, we had several events, the Compton cafeteria riots, and another riot that happened a few years before. There were a lot of activity going on, just below the surface level of, what happened with Stonewall. The fact that it happened in New York and Stonewall was a seminal moment. It's like Rosa Parks or a lot of other things. It just changed forever the nature on how everyone was looking on this, and everyone knew it was time. And the movement picked up all over the country and all over the world. It really started, but it could have happened in San Francisco just as easily. There was a lot of activism going on there around the same issue too. So my belief, it was just serendipity.
That's crazy. Like, before doing any of this Stonewall research, like, even in this moment, I didn't know that Julie Garland had died basically like a week prior to this. That's wild.
Yeah, RuPaul was right.
I am somebody that really enjoys history, but I think this is to me, the 60s is one of the most interesting time periods in American history, just because that time, or that period of history, just so many groups that have been shit on just decided enough is enough, and we're not doing it anymore. So I don't know, it's crazy to think the amount of activism that was happening, not just with gay, trans people, but
interracial relations.
Yeah, just everything was going crazy at that time period.
Yeah, definitely. It was a time for change, a push for civil rights, and it was also, the summer of free love, and, the hippies, and, just the liberation and the creativity and the expression of everything,
Mm-hmm.
It was the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Very much so. Penny Lane, bitch.
Yes, girl. All right, so let's get into the riots. So on the night of June 27th into the early mornings of June 28th on 1969, yes, that's right, 50 years ago this week.
Yup, we're here, Queens. Can you believe?
It's crazy that this was 50 years ago.
Yeah, it's really, when you think about it, it's not very long ago at all.
Definitely not. So, as Michael Bettinger said, it was after midnight on an unseasonably hot Friday night. The Stonewall was packed when 8 plainclothes officers or undercover police officers. There were 6 men and 2 women, and they entered the bar. So in addition to the bar's employees, they also singled out drag queens and other cross-dressing patrons.
They were basically going off of visuals. Oh, they look a little too gay. Let's round them up first, and then we'll get to the others later.
Yeah. And they would also try and like shake down the people that looked wealthier. So if you kind of looked like working class and were dressed in your quote unquote correct gender's clothing, they would not harass you that much.
Right. And some were even allowed to leave because they looked quote unquote respectable, law-abiding citizens.
Right. So in going forward with the riots, I just want to kind of preface this that a lot of the recounting of this is based on word of mouth. So, sometimes events were like, it's blown out of proportion, like exaggerated and
embellished
stuff like that.
A little bit.
Yeah, embellished, and so I am just saying that in case we going forward, Jamal is like, wait, no this, wait, or Sony's like, no this. So that's just a reason why that could happen in the telling of the riots.
And keep in mind, too, listeners, like Seth is in Seattle, we're in Indianapolis. We've done our own research, but we've also communicated about the research that we've done. But like Seth said, wires may cross and there may be questions. So hang in there with us.
And it's pretty well known, too, just when Stonewall story has been retold. Anytime anybody retells it, they always talk about how not everything is like in stone. Basically, like that nobody knows for sure like who did what, but these things happen. They just aren't for sure like, okay, this person exactly did this.
Right.
Always.
And you've heard it a little bit already halfway through this episode. We're using words like allegedly or it's rumored to be, and that's the reason why.
Yeah, and I also changed all the times they said transvestites to cross-dressers because we're like with the times.
That's right. Good point.
All right, so accounts vary over exactly what kicked off the riots, but according to witnesses in the crowd erupted after the police were bringing out a woman to be arrested dressed in masculine attire, and this person is believed to be lesbian activist Stormé de la Verre.
Yes.
She was complaining that her handcuffs were too tight, and so the police started to beat her. And so this time also, so as they were letting people out of the bar, people would I guess disperse, but this night people had enough and they were actually crowding. They would go across the street to the Christopher Park and they were kind of making like a little circle around the entrance to the Stonewall Inn. Imagine, so Stormé de la Verre, she's being beaten, and all of these people, like hundreds of homosexuals and drag queens, are out in front just watching this all go down. And so they were yelling things like pigs, copper, and they were throwing pennies at the officers.
Yep. They'd had enough. And shout out to the Nod podcast. It's a really good show. They actually had a whole episode on Stormy. She's basically like a badass mix. She was half African-American or black and half white, but she was a fierce stud, y'all. Like, do your research on Stormy. She was a bad bitch. And of course, that's why the crowd, is a mix of we have had enough. And this is also another prominent figure in the queer community. We weren't necessarily on the same page, lesbians, gays, and trans, like all on the same page as a unit, but she was a very prominent figure. So I think this was a trigger in this moment.
Absolutely. So after these pennies were being thrown, then followed bottles and some of the people slashed the tires of the police vehicles.
Shit was going down.
Yes. Another really important person to talk about is Marsha P. Johnson. So I think a lot of times Marsha P. Johnson is credited with being like the first person to like throw the bottles in the start. However, this was not actually the case. She wasn't the one that started the riots, but to her credit, she was the very first drag queen to be allowed into the Stonewall Inn.
Yes, everybody loved Marsha P. Johnson. If you haven't checked out the documentary on Netflix, they do a pretty good job on that story. I was familiar with her story before that, but yeah, she had a presence in the New York scene. She took in young kids off of the street and really took care of them, really giving back to the community because it had given her so much as far as survival goes.
Yeah, definitely. Just like Stormy, she was another prominent figure. So according to David Carter, who is a historian and wrote the book Stonewall, the Riots That Sparked the Gay Revolution, so the hierarchy of resistance in the riots began with the homeless or street kids, the ones that would hang in Christopher Park across the street quite often. And those young gay men viewed the Stonewall as the only safe place in their lives.
Yep. It was their safe haven. It's like, I mean, just think about, we just had the 3-year anniversary of Pulse. Gay bars are supposed to be the one place that we feel safe and we can be ourselves, and things like this happen historically.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, like, myself, you know, when I was first coming out, going to a gay bar was kind of my safe place. It was somewhere where you could feel, you know, like yourself. And I couldn't even imagine back then it was even more important because, you know, they were constantly under attack by people, or not under attack, but always having to like hide your true self.
Yeah. And I want to say this, like, we have the luxury of having the privilege to come out the way we all did, the 3 of us, and have those spaces to just walk in and not have to explain yourselves. And the people that were there at the Stonewall riots, they had the safe haven, but they still had to defend themselves, even in this, you know, place they are calling home.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think, you know, our gay bars now, it's like you just go in, you get drunk, you get wasted, find someone to hook up with, preferably not in the bathrooms or somewhere in the gay bar.
Right.
And then, so, you know, it's like, it's a lot different, you know, we can go in and out more freely. We don't really have people that, you know, come in to give us a hard time typically. And we don't have police raids anymore. So it was a way different time back there in the end of the 60s. So let's talk about Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. So these two are transgender women of color.
Yes.
And they were said to have resisted arrest and thrown the first bottle at the cops. However, later, Marsha P. Johnson said in a podcast interview that she had not arrived till the uprising was well underway.
Yep. And there's also speculation about whether Sylvia was there or not. But I think it's kind of similar to Marsha because they were close friends. It's possible that Sylvia showed up much later, just like Marsha.
Yes. So close to 4 a.m. on June 28th, 1969, the police retreated and they barricaded themselves inside of Stonewall because you have to think there were like 8 police officers and like I think I saw like around 300 to maybe even 400 homosexual, gay people, LGBT members crowded around outside against these cops.
Right. And I mean, they're just tearing up their vehicles. They're flipping cars, slashing tires. They pushed them in there. And this is something that law enforcement was not ready for because, again, that P word, privilege, they just thought that they can go in there and wave their little sticks and arrest everybody. And this was the night where people were like, hell no. There's more of us than there are of you. We've got it under control tonight.
Right. Because you can only take so much of like being told you're not good enough and being ridiculed and harassed and attacked before you will bite back, basically.
Right. Basically being treated like freak shows or circus animals. It's like, come on now.
Right. So like we were saying, the NYPD, they were forced to retreat into the Stonewall itself and barricade themselves inside. Some of the rioters even used a parking meter. They ripped it out of the ground and used it as a battering ram to break through the door.
Holy shit. What?
Others threw beer bottles, trash, and other objects or impromptu fire bombs that they made with bottles.
Hell yeah, that's my team. Give me the explosives.
What are they called? Like Molotov cocktails?
Yeah,
or
basically. Yeah.
Make it a triple.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you know, of course, this shit is going down, and then more police officers arrived, as well as squadrons of what is called the TPF, the Tactical Patrol Force. And this is basically what you would expect, you know, we would call them now, you know, police officers in riot gear. Basically, you have the large shields.
A SWAT team.
Right. Yeah, and they have helmets, and so They would basically they got together in a phalanx formation, which is basically, shields out surrounding the entire people. And they were marching in formation down Christopher Street, pushing the protesters. And, they were basically just trying to clear the area.
Yeah, very Game of Thrones. They showed up like the White Walkers were just scattered all over the place. And just more drama, more unnecessary bullshit.
Yes. But the protesters outsmarted the police officers by running away, and then they would circle around the short block of the village and come back up behind the officers.
Yep. This is their turf. Like, what do these people expect? And I'm just living for it because we have had enough. I'm all for a revolution. They're giving me life right now.
Hell yeah. So around 4 a.m., things started to settle down. Somehow nobody were killed or critically injured, though a few police officers were injured.
Yep. And by revolution, people die in revolutions. This is more of like a very harsh uprising. But amazingly, because there's rumors that some of the cops early on in the fight were so afraid that they threw their firearms because they knew visibly they were outnumbered. So it's amazing that no one in our community picked that gun up and shot somebody, like fired. Could you imagine what would happen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think like we were, very lucky that nobody was like killed in this. I think that says something, about just, being able to protest in a way that doesn't have to result in people getting killed.
Right.
I thought I also read or heard something that when, the riot team the SWAT team showed up, that a lot of the people were like doing
Kick lines,
like almost just kind of like mocking the police, like, what are you gonna do, like we're just dancing out here in the street type situation, like
you need all these
we're not
guns
posing any threat
to like get rid of us fairies. Like, sorry to use that term, but that's what they were calling them. Like, you need all of this ammo to take care of this. We're just out here dancing, serving you fierce in life, and this is what you want to do.
Which and that's what, like, I don't know. That's what I love about the gay community or the queer trans community, is that we can make like a joke out of anything. To be honest, we can take the most, terrible circumstances and make it into something fun.
Some kind of joy.
Yes, I will. I have a little research about what Stoney just said because what he said was true. And so while the police were marching and trying to push the crowd back, they were openly mocking the police. The crowd was cheering and it started an impromptu kick line, and they sang to the tune of a song called Ta-ra-ra Boom Da, and that is a vaudeville and music hall song, and became widely known as like a protest song. And the people at Stonewall changed the lyrics to, "We are the Stonewall girls, we wear our hair in curls, we don't wear underwear, we show our pubic hair." So just imagine like all these queens kick lining saying that.
And these guys are just getting pissed, right? Because I mean, think about it. What if there's like a closeted queen on the police force and they're just like getting extra pissed because they're just like, you're not brave enough to be doing what we're doing. You need a gun and I just have my best heels on.
Right? They just got in line with all their best Judys and were doing their kick line. Work.
Yeah.
So despite having been torn apart by the cops, the Stonewall Inn opened before the dark of the next night. It was not serving alcohol. However, more and more supporters showed up chanting slogans like "Gay Power" and "We Shall Overcome."
Yeah, this is really like the start of, okay, we're here. This is not going to stop, so we need to keep this going. So supporters showed up. People are really rallying together, especially recounting everything that happened the night previously.
Yeah, and the cops came again
to
restore order, and even more TPF officers, and they were beating and tear gassing members of the crowd. And this continued until the early hours of the morning again, when the crowd finally dispersed.
Yeah, it's just wild. Like, what gives? Like, your ego is hurt that badly that you have to show up with poisonous gases to disarm these people that aren't even drinking. They're just going to a safe place and being together as people, and you're just disrupting this.
Yeah. And over the next several nights, gay activists continued to gather near the Stonewall, taking advantage of the moment to spread information and build the community that would fuel the growth of gay rights movement. Though the police officers returned, the mood was less confrontational, with isolated skirmishes replacing riots the previous couple nights.
Right. I think I feel like I don't want to speak, obviously, because we weren't there, but if I'm dissecting this and trying to think about what my mind would be going through after that happened, okay, you've had 2 nights of basically riots. How can we be smart about this? Okay, we're not going to be forced back into the closet or into the shadows. How can we be smart about this? So you kind of have to go through the motions just a little bit just to survive to that next day to make the next move.
Right. So you have to remember that the own mayor of New York City was wanting to hide all showings of the homosexuals in New York City. That was not a good look for his city.
Right. There was some big event coming up or something, right?
The World's Fair.
The World's Fair.
It was being held in New York in 1964, but this was obviously the lasting effects from that starting.
Right. Okay.
So the Village Voice, which was covering the riots, which often referred to the attendees of the Stonewall as the forces of faggotry.
Yep.
So some of the protesters swarmed outside of the Village Voice's office, and they called for the burning of the building. And when the police pushed back, rioting started again, but only lasted a short time this night, concluding around midnight on July 2nd of 1969.
Mm-hmm. The Village Voice was under fire by our community because they're much more willing to publish slurs than facts and what was happening and the lack of humanity that was existing in that community.
Wow, sounds like a cable news channel I know.
Oh.
Is it named after an animal?
Maybe.
A sly animal? So the New York Daily News also resorted to homophobic slurs in its detailing of the coverage. And one of the headlines they ran at this time, just so you guys know, Homo Nest raided, Queen Bees are stinging mad. That was one of the headlines in the New York Daily News.
Queen bees are stinging mad. Only if Beyonce existed back then.
Girl, the hive would have been shook.
I can hear Formation playing in the streets.
Yes. All right. That was the Stonewall. That was the Stonewall Riots. So out of the riots, in the spirit of the 60s rebellion, and it spread to LGBT people in New York and beyond. So they, for the first time, found themselves as a part of a community. Though the gay rights movement didn't begin at Stonewall, like we said, the uprising did mark a turning point, as earlier homosexual underground societies that were underground, it gave way to more radical groups like the GLF, the Gay Liberation Front, and the GAA, the Gay Activist Alliance.
Yes, there are all kinds of groups forming. Now, keep in mind, like I mentioned earlier, the community, it's figuring itself out, really. Stoney and I were talking about this in the car earlier. This was the first time that we were all out together. Lesbians, gay men, gay cis men, trans men and women. So we're still very much figuring that out. So some of these groups were all lesbians. Some of them were all cis men. So we're still figuring that out. But yes, the activism was there and the groups are starting.
And some of the groups too, from my research, it seemed like a lot of things I read, some of the groups were more progressive than others.
Yes.
Some groups were more, I guess, conservative in thinking about
basically
gay
only
rights.
Dudes.
Thinking okay, we just want to be kind of left alone. And others were like, no, bitch, we're coming out and we're going to be in straight places and do what straight people do, but be gay about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a lot of differing opinions, whereas some people wanted to be kind of more low key and others were just nope, we're coming out and we're here to make our mark.
100%. So 1 year later, June 28th, 1970, on the first anniversary of the police raid of the Stonewall Inn, gay activists in New York organized the Christopher Street Liberation March to cap off the city's first Gay Pride Week.
Yes.
So this first Gay Pride Week, as several hundred people, they began marching up 6th Avenue towards Central Park. Supporters from the crowd joined them. The procession eventually stretched some 15 city blocks, which, if you've ever been to New York, you know these are not small blocks. So that's a lot of space. And the march included thousands of people.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people showed up. Again, they're just keeping that momentum going. Like, we're here, we're queer, get used to it.
That's right. And, you know, inspired by New York's example, activists in other cities, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, and Chicago, organized gay pride celebrations that same year. And the frenzy of this activism born on that night in Stonewall would eventually fuel gay rights movements in Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Australia, and New Zealand, among other countries, becoming a lasting force that would carry on for the last 50 years.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. Like, that was the spark. It set off the firecracker, and I'm glad it had that impact.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shame that all of this was going on, but thanks to the bravery of everyone else, you know, they were able to shed a light on the abuses of the police and just the fact that it's ridiculous that we have a group of people that just can't be themselves and they weren't bothering anyone. So I don't know. It's just really inspiring to like hear the story and see what they were able to create based off their activism.
Yeah.
Really. And really to be recognized. I mean, again, Marsha P. Johnson, the first drag queen to be in the Stonewall Inn, and also a transgender woman of color. These are people, you know, Sylvia Rivera. We have Stormy de la Vere. I'm sorry, I'm really bad. But yeah, Stormy. These women that were at the forefront of, you know, the movement, that's where the revolution really started, you know, with them, and then the homeless youths that were really kind of defending the only place that they all felt safe. And out of that, we've made a lot of progress with the LGBT plus rights, but obviously, you know, kind of as we sort of sprinkled through the podcast, we're not there yet. There's still a lot of work to be done, especially for our trans sisters and brothers, and especially for our trans sisters of color.
Yes, God. So much more work to do. So it's nice that we can have pride and all these things, but it's nice to recount stories like Stonewall so we can really get back to our roots and remember why we have the privilege that we do today in the queer community, but also realizing that the work is never going to be done. It's never going to be done.
Right.
Yeah, it's always, I don't know, it's always a hard thing with anytime you have civil rights, it's always under attack and there's always somebody trying to take it away. So that's why you always have to keep moving forward because, you know, there will always be the other side trying to take back what, you know, you've worked to get. So
right.
It's important to remember that just because, you know, gay marriage is legal and, you know, maybe it's more socially acceptable, that doesn't mean that you give up. And also trans people are still going through hell right now. So we have to be there for the trans people and help them.
Because they're part of our community.
Right.
Yes. We can't pick and choose what we want to do. We all need to be a unit. And like, shout out to Frygay. I like Maddie's line, check your privilege. Like, we all need to check our privilege during this time and just be respectful of what had to go down for us to be where we are today.
Right. You know, just because we're at a time where it's more accepting, it doesn't mean that the fight is over. There's still so much to be done. You know, we have people in office now that are trying to kind of roll back these rights to the time before the Stonewall Riots. And we have to stay vigilant. And when people ask, oh, well, why do they need a straight Pride Month? That's why. This Stonewall Riots is why we need, well, one of the reasons, but, you know, that's one of the reasons why we have straight Pride, or that's why we have gay pride parades and not straight pride parades. Straight pride parades are fucking bullshit. And I saw a picture of a straight pride parade and it was like 5 like dudes with beer bellies on the side of the road fucking having a shitty ass time.
Of course it was. And it's like, oh, this is like a Wednesday for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't even a parade. They were so fucking lazy. They just sat there and did jack shit.
And yes, straight listeners, we know it's not all all straight people, but if you're triggered by that, then you need to think about it a little bit because something's not sitting too right within yourself.
It's just more understanding that, yes, it's more socially acceptable now to be out and gay, but growing up and even when you're not out, gay people, trans people, queer people, we all grow up with a sense of shame because we're different and we're constantly told that we're not
good enough,
or
we'll never be.
We live in a straight world where it's okay to see somebody walking, like a straight couple holding hands or kissing in public, but then the moment a gay person does it or trans person, then it's looked or frowned upon. So
yeah,
we need gay pride to feel good about ourselves because growing up we didn't feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, and just like the police in the Stonewall Riots, even today the police are letting fucking Nazis walk through our pride parades with loaded guns. So not a lot has changed. We talked about that a little bit on the last podcast, but now that the history of Stonewall, like it's really scary to see the same exact type things happening today. There's I think he's a mayor or some elected public official, and I'm somewhere in the South, I think it's Alabama, but he wants to start this Make America Straight Again, where he thinks the only way to solve the issue is by killing all gay people.
Yeah, I wish somebody would roll up on me. That'll be the last thing they do, because let me tell you, I'm a black queen and a gay queen, so I've got double the ammo and rage inside of here if you push me in that direction.
And that's
okay.
And that's the thing. These incidents may be kind of like outliers, but that's why it's important to have leaders in our country that denounce shit like that, because the moment you have somebody leading the country that okays it or gives everyone the green light to just be racist, homophobic pieces of shit, that's when they come out of the woodwork. So as gay people, as queer people, we all have to come together and say fuck off, this is not okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to stay united. So don't let, this Russian online bot campaign like stir you up or deter you from, staying connected with what's happening in the world. Don't let these assholes like this guy in Alabama get you down. Like, just disregard all that negativity. We are valid people. We are no different. Actually, we are different from some people because we're actually nice, empathetic, and we don't wish for other people's deaths.
Right. It's like, come on, dude. Like, just go eat your fucking Whopper, Junior, whatever the fuck you do.
Yeah.
And leave us the hell alone.
Right.
There is one thing I did want to say. I don't know if you had this in your notes, Seth, or not, but one thing that I thought was something very important for our country and just to see from a president was in 2016, Obama designated Stonewall as a national monument to honor just, that part of our history.
Yep.
And to me, that was a big deal because there's not been many politicians, especially at that level, the leader of our country, actually, acknowledge the struggles and acknowledge the fact that, LGBT people have had to go through all this. So it's kind of crazy to think back in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was just letting gay people die of AIDS. And now we had a president that was honoring our community.
Yep. That is 100% true, and I do have a few notes about that. So in June 1999, the United States Department of the Interior designated 51 and 53 Christopher Street and the surrounding area for the National Register of Historic Places, and for the first time, the first of significance to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. And in a dedication ceremony, the Assistant Secretary of the Department of the Interior, John Barry, stated, "Let it forever be remembered that here, on this spot, men and women stood proud. They stood fast so that we may be who we are. We may work where we will, live where we choose, and love whom our hearts desire." And the Stonewall in itself was named a National Historic Landmark in February 2000.
Yes.
And Barack Obama named it in his second inauguration address also.
Oh yeah,
I can't find the quote.
I
but
do remember that.
I think in 2016 he must have made it a part of the national park system or something where it was maybe like an additional protection.
Yeah, I remember reading about it when
yes.
it happened.
Here, June 24th, 2016, President Obama announced that the establishment of the Stonewall National Monument site to be administered by the National Park Service. So this designation, which followed the transfer of the city park land to federal government, protects Christopher Park and the adjacent areas totaling more than 7 acres. The Stonewall Inn is within boundaries of the monument but remains privately owned. So what Stoney said, basically. So what Stoney was saying was that it became federal property so that it would be like maintained and protected by the federal government.
Nice.
I wish I could find that quote from Barack Obama, but
Maybe we'll tweet it out if we find it.
yeah, if I can find where I saw that.
Oh,
I'll
like
tweet
when
it.
he designated it, you mean?
When he mentioned the Stonewall in his second inauguration speech. So I wanted to say that that quote too, but I can't find it now. Sorry, guys. Before we let you go, I'm just going to peruse my notes to see if there's anything else we should say. But yeah, anyways. So actually, one more thing before we leave. In June of 2019, there is a celebration planned to mark the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Riots and World Pride 2019. So that will be held in Manhattan, across New York City, and throughout the world.
Very cool. We'll try to stream that online. I'm sure there's going to be video somewhere.
Oh yeah, so keep tuned, and on this coming 28th, just remember where a lot of what we have now came from, and all the people that really sacrificed and risked their well-being to make our country now what it is, and we need to keep that progress going.
Yes, God.
So that is our podcast about Stonewall 50 years and still going. So before we leave, I guess, is there any sort of message that you would like to leave us with, or maybe something that you're proud of as a member of the LGBT community?
Ooh, who wants to go first?
I can say something, I guess. So I think for me, growing up, we didn't really, at least in the area I was in, there wasn't a lot of gay support or any type of discussion about gay history. So I think it's really important that, things like Stonewall and other gay history starts to be discussed and like included in, history books so people can learn about the mistakes and things that have happened in the past. So to me, I'm proud of the fact that Pride is becoming more mainstream and that people are talking about it more, because it gives, kids that are queer, trans, an opportunity when they're growing up so that they're not ashamed of who they are, and that they will hopefully grow up in a world where they're proud of themselves and they don't have to deal with shame or of any way or any form of shame.
Nice. I think for me, being a person of color and also being part of the queer community, I identify as a gay man, but I try to be respectful of my trans brothers and sisters and my lesbian sisters and everybody under the rainbow. So I tend to use queer more these days, but it's so important to acknowledge even the darkest parts of your history. It's thinking back on school now, I was a 4.0 student, and thinking about AP history and how we glorified our presidents like George Washington and Andrew Jackson, when really deep down they were trash and they were just like slave rapists and hunters. Acknowledging all the dark parts to see why we are at the point we are today. That's the same for us in the queer community. We need to remember these stories and not be sad or somber on things like Pride. It's supposed to be fun, but remember and respect where you come from. And before you take that shot and twerk to your fave, think about people like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson and Harvey Milk, and I can go on and on and on. Remember those people and check your privilege and just think about it for a second and try to be a little bit more kind and respectful to your brothers and sisters. And even with people filled with hatred, safety first always, but if you're not getting through to them, leave them be. They're not ready to receive the message. And that's all they want, right? Oh, you're forcing this on me. You're existing, so you're forcing your sexuality on me. We know that's not the case, so try your best to just stay strong and positive and do your best to be the best human being that you can be.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think it's really great. A good thing about the society that we've come to is that we have shows like RuPaul's Drag Race. We have Pose. We have Paris is Burning. You know, we have all this media that shows that it's just okay to be who you are. You know, we have people like our divas. We have people like, back then it was Judy Garland. There is actually a Judy Garland movie coming out in the near future.
Yep.
So that is something that I would be interested to see because I mean, she didn't throw the first brick at Stonewall, but I mean, clearly she was, one of the inspirations to some of the people, if not, not all of them. But I mean, that has changed. We see people like, some of the biggest pop stars, even just within this last week, Taylor Swift performed at the Stonewall Inn.
I don't like Taylor Swift, and I don't know if this was calculated or not, but good job, bitch. I'll give you that.
At least it wasn't Arian Perry.
Yeah, at least it was not Arian Perry.
Yeah,
true.
It's like maybe we're not like Taylor stans, but I respect her for what she has started to become more of a voice for the gay.
110%.
Yeah, I like her for the message that she stands for. Some of her music's okay,
yes,
but I respect her for what she's doing. We have people like Lady Gaga. We just saw her. There's a whole song called "Born This Way" where it's like it doesn't matter who you love. It's just be yourself is the whole message of the song. So it's
that's
great.
That's an anthem.
Yeah, 100. And so yeah, we have all these people in the media. We have all this media. We have all these divas. We have all these people in pop culture with lots of visibility speaking out. So I really hope that this gives the younger people in our community just sort of finding themselves, or maybe not quite there yet, inspiration that they can be themselves.
Yeah.
And that there will be people that support them, even if it's not the people that gave birth to you. There are people out in the world that will help support you, and it gets better. So hold on.
Yeah, that's a great message. It does get better, y'all. Encourage your allies. Like, we really need those voices. Like, we might not be the biggest Taylor Swift fans. Now listen, that 1989 album was great. Okay, that was really good.
I love Out of the Woods.
Yeah, I do too. Wildest Dreams. Oh my God,
Welcome
that's my
to
jam.
New York.
So
that's good too.
But this is what we need. We need the allies speaking out. It's very much like the people of color movement. Like, we can only say so much. It's not our job as Black people, as brown people, as queer people to educate everybody. We are tired of doing that. So we need more of like our allies and white allies specifically to speak up on our behalf. Don't speak for us, but, support us and show that support. So the tide catches on.
Right. Yeah, like, back then there weren't people like this. Of course, Judy Garland was a big icon for the community. But, I mean, our people that we have now are sort of like the Marsha P. Johnsons and the Stormies of now. So, because back then there weren't people like Lady Gaga and there weren't people like Taylor Swift, and people like looked to Marsha P. Johnson and all these other people of color and members of the LGBT community as sort of their figureheads.
Yep.
Yeah, and just it's easy to like get on social media and hear and see the negativity that people put out there, but just remember that, progress, I think Obama said this one time, but he said progress is not a straight line. So yes, we've made progress, but there's always going to be backlash a little bit to what you're doing and what, the progress that you've made. So don't get frustrated, just continue to do what you do and keep promoting and, fighting the fight.
One day at a time.
And love yourself, even if you aren't, finding luck in the love department or whatever. There's always hope for something good to happen to you. So just love yourself, and you are valid. You are a valid person no matter what anyone tells you. So if you are someone that is not in a supportive environment and you need somebody to reach out to, our email is definitely open. We, have several people that we speak to regularly just as friends, of the podcast. But we're also, willing to help, support as much as we can. We are busy people, so be a little bit patient, but we will get back to everybody. So all of our contact is down below in the notes of the podcast. So feel free to reach out.
Yes, listeners, you know where to find us. Thank you so much for rating and subscribing and reviewing us. And remember this, you are loved. TFC loves you.
Well, and if
We love you, girl.
we do, and if someone that isn't subscribed to our podcast needs to hear this, feel free to pass this episode along.
Yep. We needed to hear these things at some point in our lives, the three of us, so we want to pass that on.
Absolutely. So with that, we are going to end this podcast, and thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, girl.